Hey, good morning, everybody. It's Manny Mustakakis. Decided to do a video this morning on a couple of concepts related to nutrition and dieting. Good friend of mine, Dr. Cheng Ruan, who some of you know very well, asked me for my opinion on something called intermittent fasting. And really, it's part of a bigger growing trend of meal regularity and research into how the timing and frequency of our meals and how we eat impacts the risk for heart disease, the risk for developing diabetes, and the risk of obesity. So what is intermittent fasting and meal regularity? Well, in large part, a lot of the focus on nutrition has to do with understanding how hormones, particularly insulin, impact diabetes, impact the risk of developing diabetes and the risk of developing obesity. Insulin is a hormone that is implicated in fat deposition and implicated in increasing particularly central fat and fat around your gut. It also predisposes to increased risk of developing diabetes and increased risk of heart disease when your body becomes resistant to insulin, which a lot of people suspect happens when there's irregular spikes in the release of the hormone. So how does fasting, intermittent fasting, and meal regularity impact that? Well, intermittent fasting is a concept where you basically eat more or less whatever you want, kind of within reason, but all within an 8-hour window in the day, and then don't eat anything for the other 16 hours of the day. And the idea is that if you eat with some regularity, that it will regulate the levels of insulin that are released rather than having big spikes and crashes. You have a little bit more regularity of the insulin levels. There's some preliminary data about that. I'm going to actually post a link to an article in Circulation, which is a very reputable cardiology journal. So I'm glad that they picked that up, because it implies that this is a growing trend that they think is going to probably have a lot of benefit down the line, or show a lot of benefit down the line. I generally find that intermittent fasting, in my experience, has been, while it's a little bit difficult to implement because, look, we're all really busy in the course of the day, it's hard to necessarily regulate exactly when our 8-hour window is going to start and exactly when our 8-hour window is going to end. We've got kids, we've got running around chasing after kids, we've got work, we've got traffic. It can be hard to sometimes eat on a regular schedule. But I do think that there is ample evidence that it is great for weight loss and it is great for maintaining lower levels of insulin, which probably one day I suspect will prove to have to show a decrease in risk of developing overt diabetes. I don't necessarily recommend intermittent fasting for people who already are diabetic, because I think there's just too much of an unknown with respect to how your blood sugars may rise and fall if you don't eat for that 16-hour window, particularly in patients who already take insulin injections. I think it can be a little bit too much of an unknown at this point to really recommend that. That's why the other strategy that I recommend, particularly for people who are either looking to maintain a certain weight, for people who are already diabetic, for people who maybe are looking for a different strategy, perhaps you're looking for muscle building or something other than weight loss, I think is smaller intermittent meals, but smaller regular meals, but multiple meals over the course of the day. 5 to 6 small meals rather than 2 or 3 large meals. 5 to 6 small meals a day, that is fairly clearly been shown to reduce the risk of cardiovascular events, and there's a couple of reasons why. Probably, again, maintaining a more moderated level of insulin rather than big spikes and crashes in insulin. So a lot of times when you don't eat for several hours, or maybe you only eat 1 or 2 big meals a day, you'll notice big spikes in insulin and then crashes in blood sugar afterward, which is why a lot of times after a huge meal, a couple of hours later, you notice a big crash, and then you're kind of at risk for overeating and binging and binge overeating. And that can really, those spikes in insulin levels really probably wreak havoc on how fat is deposited and how your body's risk of obesity and cardiovascular events. So like I say, there is data that's pretty clear that if you only eat 1 or 2 big meals a day, you probably are at a little bit higher risk of having adverse heart-related events. So 5 to 6 small meals a day I love. In any nutrition strategy, I think you have to maintain a lot of water. Hydration is critical in any nutrition strategy and weight loss strategy, or any kind of muscle building strategy. Whatever your goal is, hydration is critical. And I think the last thing I will say about nutrition is that I want my patients to be eating their last meal at least 2 or 3 hours before bedtime. I think it's important not to eat very close to bedtime. That there is a lot of evidence that shows that eating too close to bedtime probably increases your risk of both obesity and heart disease, and perhaps diabetes as well, although that is a little bit less clear. But obesity and heart disease for sure, there's an increased risk if you're eating too close to bedtime. So that's a basic tip that I give a lot of patients who are asking me about weight loss. Again, weight loss, one of those things we don't spend nearly enough time talking about as physicians in general. But I think one thing that's usually pretty simple that people can do is just don't eat that close to bedtime. So if you're going to bed at 10 o'clock, I usually will tell people don't eat after about 6:30 or 7 o'clock. It can be a little bit of a challenge, right? We're all, a lot of times we're at home at night, it's late, maybe you're watching TV, you're watching a ball game or something, and you just pick at those pretzels or popcorn or something. Sometimes it's just out of boredom, sometimes it's just out of habit, but whether it's an intermittent fasting strategy or multiple small meals a day strategy, try to make your last meal a few hours before bedtime, and I think that is probably, the science behind that is probably pretty clear. So I'm going to end it right here. I hope you guys got something out of this. Please let me know what you think, what's working for you, what your goals are, and if you've tried this before, I'd love to get your feedback on if intermittent fasting has worked for you. So let me know where you're watching from. I'm coming from my house in Long Island, New York, and I hope to interact with you guys on this thread. Please comment below, and have a great Sunday, everybody. I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.